I'm talking about I'm talking about dual enrollment and having my homeschooler who then turned into a specialty school ready for college, career and college readiness. So it's been an interesting journey participating in such a wonderful opportunity with Dr. Khadijah Ali-Coleman in writing this chapter. I didn't think that I had it in me to actually really write. I think full disclosure, I was coming off, some medical illness. I didn't have a lot going on at the time. And she put the call out, and I was like, things are really easy right now. Let me just throw this out here. And lo and behold, she was like, yes, I really want you to write that. I want this topic. So the chapter really goes into my journey from homeschooling to one of my children deciding they no longer wanted to be homeschooled, and how my husband and I had to handle that because, we were the original homeschool or bust type family. And then matriculating on with my two other children and some mistakes that we realized that we made along the way, not treating all of our children as individual learners and lumping them together as it relates to they all got to participate in the same sport to make it convenient for us, or they're all using the same curriculum because I don't want to spend money on other curriculum. So, looking back, hindsight is always 2020. And I just walk people through just an honest conversation of what our journey was like, the good, the bad, the not so good. I don't want to call it ugly because I don't think any part of this journey has been ugly. But there have been teachable moments for our students as well as for, my husband and I. So that's my chapter, very briefly in a nutshell.
Thank you for that, Shanita. And let's go to Dr. Jason. Tell us about yourself and your chapter.
So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Esters. I'm originally from Jackson, Mississippi, but for the last 20 or so years, I've been residing in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and that's where most of our homeschool journey has taken place. Been homeschooling for about as long as Chanita has. I think we probably started in like 2009 or something along those. The years kind of fused together. But we've been doing this thing for a while. It went from, so we've seen the transition from it being a weird thing that you might be doing to something that some people might find questionable to something that's being accepted and then even something that's being preferred. So we've been part of that whole journey. I've got four beautiful brown rambunctious children, and two of which are now, the oldest two boys are currently attending community college of Philadelphia. And the title of my chapter is, I've changed the title several times. So the new title is 12 Ways to Prepare Your Homeschooling Black Sons for College. And, part of my perspective on the chapter is I've been blessed that during my homeschool journey, I've had an opportunity to talk to and have personal relationships with other Black families who have homeschooled their children before my kids were of age. And so that gave me some insight as to what the college journey might be for them. But also, I'm a college professor at the Community College of Philadelphia. And I had opportunity to teach homeschool students, right? And, coming across some of the students that were homeschooled, I realized that a lot of times we hear some of the kind of like the more positive veneer of, hey, we're preparing all our kids for our homeschool kids for college. But I had kids that struggled. I had some kids in my classroom who were homeschooled that struggled with the college experience and then trying to figure out why. And then when my oldest transitioned into college, he struggled. And I'm sitting up there like, what's going on? Like, if anybody should get it, it should be this guy, just because I'm teaching college and we kind of prepared. But I realized that part of our preparation for college really wasn't a preparation for the kid that we had. It was kind of preparation around the stuff that we always say about college. And so some of what I offer in the chapter are some of the cautions against some of our own assumptions that we've internalized around college for our children. Another way of putting it is like this. Earlier during sessions, Khadijah talked about the importance of deschooling, right? And we think about that in terms of what we offer to our young people, K through 12. But there's also a kind of deschooling slash decolonization process that we need to go in terms of the way we think about college too, because for some of us, we've internalized the idea of college or college attainment or even college entrance as a pinnacle of their educational life, but the real lived lives of our babies isn't necessarily that. And so, I can say that, but what I tried to capture in the chapter was a little bit of me living through that. And so, a lot of my chapter is one long conversation that I had with my oldest son in the car. Like basically, we're leaving a school day, and kind of our conversation around school. And so I wanted to try to share that with you. Full disclosure, one of the things I'm trying to work out is how to honestly reflect what homeschool has been for me without putting a lot of fluff or filler around it, because one of the most important parts of sharing our homeschool journeys with each other is being able to be witnesses to the thing that really happened. And historically, there's something happening there too, but being able to capture what really happened is sometimes harder. There's an honesty there that's hard to kind of capture in writing sometimes, because a lot of the writing that we're trained to do resists that kind of honesty of witness. And I can talk more about that later on, but I'm really happy to see all y'all here, just to be able, that's the Jackson in me coming out. I'm really just happy to see all y'all here to be able to really remind me that the community that we have as people that are deeply invested in educating our children is so wide and so vast and so deep. So kudos to you all for constantly being invested in the process.
Thank you for that. Natalie?
Yes, hi.
Hi, tell us about yourself and your chapter.
Okay, so I'm Natalie Mack. I am a veteran military homeschooler. We started homeschooling our children in 2001, a few weeks before 9/11. We have 5 children. So our youngest is Nathaniel, who was just on the panel, and that was a great panel. I was so proud of all of them. Um, and he's now 12th grade. And then we have the other 4 who we homeschooled to college, and they are all now college graduates. So we have 4 college graduates. 2 of them had gone on and finished graduate school, one in international education and one in social work. And then the last one that just graduated from college in May, he's now at Virginia Tech studying urban planning for his master's. So Nathaniel has, he talked a little bit about that. And so it's been a journey for us, and it's been an incredible journey as a military family. We've pretty much, like you mentioned, homeschooled and moved all over the world. And my husband is a Navy chaplain, so we've had some interesting experiences around, just being a Navy chaplain family in the military as well. My chapter is homeschooling a future NCAA athlete. And it was really a great experience to write that chapter. Um, I was able to really share our journey. And I'm really passionate about making sure that families who have been homeschooling successfully from K through 8th or any part of that journey, and they are looking ahead to high school. And one of the determinations that can often cause homeschooling families to pivot to the public school or even back to it if you were there once is the sports piece, right? You have a student who loves sports and wants to play that sport in college, and a lot of families really either don't know that homeschoolers can get picked up to play. They don't know the process, or they may be a little bit intimidated because it is one of those processes that you feel as if I fail, if I mess up, then I'm messing up my child's dream to play in college. And what does that look like? So I pretty much went through the whole journey of how we as a family have always supported our children's passions and interests. That has taken us down a lot of roads, a lot of energy and time, and sometimes money. But it has paid off. They're all individual, whole people, sound people, and very confident in what they love to do and who they are. And I know homeschooling has been so much a part of why that has happened for them. And so that was some of what I poured out into the chapter is, you have a student who says, even at age 7, I don't know how Alexandra, she's this athlete who was the athlete, still is an athlete, said that I want to play Division 1 soccer, mommy. And I thought, like, we didn't come from athletes, our family, right? I've never kicked a soccer ball around at all until I had kids. And when she said that, I just kind of like, okay, like, what do you know about Division 1? She knew enough, and she began to show us through the years her commitment, her passion, her helping at home, being a team player, being an independent learner, getting things done. I never had to remind her of, her responsibilities as a member of our family, as well as her academic responsibilities, right? And so just that whole journey and that process and going through the NCAA eligibility process, we talk about that as well. And that's something that I speak on at conferences as well, is helping other families know that journey. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And as I've said in the other panels and talks today, any questions that we don't get answered, if you can just post them in the message board so our panelists can respond to you there. But we're going to try to get to some of the questions that I'm seeing already. I did want to introduce myself as in regards to this book. So I've said my connection to BFHES, but I am very similar. I have a history very similar to Jason. I taught for over a decade at community college. I love community colleges. I was working at Morgan State University in the early 2000s. I was assistant director of residence life academic development. So I had to be the mean lady who was telling students that are failing out and going to lose their housing and come up with reactionary programming to get them straight academically. And the students who I was hiring as tutors and to work in the capacity of academic support, many of them were immigrants. Many of them were people who were not born in this country, who had come into this country and started at community colleges. So I think in another session, I had mentioned that somebody had asked me when I was going back to my country, and I didn't follow up and say that I was born in DC. I don't speak Spanish. I don't speak any other language except for broken French every now and again that I learned but I'm a Black woman from the USA. And so I had to have people from other countries tell me about how community colleges changed their lives. And many of them came into community college, came into this country, attending a community college, doing exceedingly well, and getting full rides to 4-year institutions. My experience in high school was that if you even mentioned you were going to a community college, people would laugh you out of the room. They would just the negative connotation. And so it was that moment working at Morgan and interacting with my students who were also these student employees that I had hired, where I learned more about community colleges. And at the time, my daughter was 4. And I just learned and I began studying. And then I entered Morgan's program in 2016, their community college leadership program after I started teaching at community colleges. Because community colleges are the ways that most people are even able to consider a college experience. And what folks don't realize is that more than 60% of undergraduate students started at a community college or attended a community college in some respect, whether it was taking a class that they needed for a general education requirement or for something. They started there and then transitioned to a university. So I really had every intention to go. My trajectory was to go and to be a college president, but COVID happened. And I started doing this homeschooling thing around COVID because everyone started realizing what my dissertation was on, which was um, dual enrolled homeschool African American students and their perceptions of preparedness for college. So I homeschooled my daughter off and on through P through 12, but she was dual enrolled, got her associates while I was homeschooling her for high school, and then she got full ride to the University of San Francisco, which she just graduated from last year. And so I wanted to I this book came about because when we're talking about a college pathway, um I wanted to share all the different angles in which that entry point to this college conversation emerges. And so Natalie's talking about from this perspective of an athlete. Jason is talking about from this perspective of a Black male who is continuing to have these considerations of the world around them where they fit in individually, and that larger landscape of how the world um, shows up for him as in this Black body and how that impacts this trajectory. We don't talk about that. I love also what I have told Jason, because we've gone back and forth with this editing process. He is a writer. He is I don't think you share that you're an English professor. So I know I'm dealing with someone who is a lyrical storyteller. So how can we keep that infused in this story that still is a testimony and is something to be used as a learning resource for homeschooling parents? And then with Chanita, even in her introduction, she glosses over the fact that her health situation impacted, as the matriarch of her family, impacted everybody in her household, including her homeschooled children. And so that in our editing process, that has been where I have asked her to please, this isn't something we want to hear this story because someone is going to read this book who is having health challenges and believes that there is no way possible for them to continue to curate this learning experience for their children. And also a lot of Black parents believe that the child, even if there's even an utterance of wanting to return to the school system or having to return to the school system, is failure on your part. And your story reassures that homeschooling is a learning practice, yes, but it's also a parenting practice that doesn't end when our children return back to these P through 12 traditional school spaces, as many of our children have done. And my daughter was in middle school and asked to return to homeschooling for high school. So all of these stories are different. My chapter is, I'm going to do the intro, but I'm also doing a chapter on homeschooling somebody who told you flat out, I don't want no damn school anymore. I'm not going to college. And then they're going to graduate with 2 degrees in 3 years. So there's a whole story involved in that as well. And so that is what I wanted to introduce, in terms of how I even fit into the scenario before I ask the first question, which is, and actually someone posed it already in the chat. They also asked, Jason, since you taught at the school, did your child get to go free? Mine didn't. I was an adjunct.
Absolutely, and I put in there. That's one of the choices, right? I mean, sometimes I'll say, I could teach somewhere else, but there are particular reasons to, core values. The people, community college students are who I want to teach. Number one, that's the
Right.
demographic that I want to teach. But secondly, the advantage in terms of the education that a community college gives in terms of preparing, especially homeschool students for what they're going to face later. You really can't beat it in a lot of ways. Number one, it's cheaper. Number two, it can give them a foothold on what it means to transition from a space when they have a lot of autonomy and control of their education to a place where you're in a brick and mortar institution that has rules. And to be honest, a 4-year institution for some of our kids is just too much for that transition. They don't have enough time to figure out what's really going on, and it's easy for them to get left behind. The other piece of the around community college education is that for those of us who have a heart for technical and vocational spaces, there's a place for them to grow in those ways as well. So I'm a big proponent of community college, and I'm glad they get to go for free. We're blessed in that way. But I also mentioned in the chat that our community college has a special grant / scholarship where city residents can attend for free. You know, in another political climate, when it seemed like we were moving in that direction, our college was able to take advantage and build in a programming, and it's actually called the Octavia Scotto Scholarship. And we can talk more about it.
And do your children attend as dual enrolled, or have they been graduated from your homeschool?
Oh, that's a great question, and it kind of ties into what Natalie's going to talk to us about.
Yep.
Because even though we didn't emphasize testing in our homeschool, my sons they topped out in terms of their testing for college entrance. So we had a choice. We could have just graduated them forward and just got them into school, but they still want to be a part of the high school environment because they're high school athletes. And so they want to, continue with their athletics and then go ahead and move over. So they're actually dual enrolled.
So I think that is an important note. It sounds like where we're starting to enter this conversation is through the hacks of the system. And so for those who have just joined us, and for those who have been here, when I talk about dual enrollment, you know what? I haven't done a lot of call and response. Can anybody post in the chat what you believe or understand dual enrollment to be? And I'm going to keep talking while I see people respond in the chat. But dual enrollment, I talked about how community college was a hack for many of the student employees that I had, for them to go to a community college and then be able to transfer to a 4-year institution with scholarships, because they now, for many students who are immigrants who come here, a lot of times their schooling, it's some disconnect or they're not eligible for scholarships. But when they start at a community college, they have a transcript from a community college, then that's on par for especially a state school to look at for considerations for scholarships. For our students who are in high school, dual enrollment is different than them starting at an institution as a first-year student. So dual enrollment literally means you are duly enrolled as a high school student, and for some who start in middle school, there are some, and even elementary. We see all those stories of homeschooling graduating at 7 years old, but for the most part, it's high school students who are dual enrolled in high school as well as dual enrolled in college. So what Jason just mentioned is the considerations that were taken, the things that were taken into consideration for him as an athlete, but also you want to take into consideration when your child starts, so that because their status impacts their ability to get scholarships. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And so I'm seeing. I'm a dual enrollment coordinator full-time. Excited to see how you describe DE. Thank you very much. I got my gold star. Yes. Being enrolled in high school while taking college credit courses. Yes. Student attends high school classes and college classes simultaneously. They are dual enrolled. Chanita, correct me if I'm wrong. Did one of your children do dual enrollment?
Yeah, so my oldest was in the 8th grade, and she was one of the ones that came and said, I'm sick of y'all pretty much. I want to do something else. And someone said in chat, how we as parents, we attach our identity, even in homeschool, as a failure if for some reason that they decide they don't want to do it, or what did I do wrong? And what I realized is that she needed more outlet. And while we did the sports, we did 4-H, and we did library story time, and we did all the things for that, that buzzword of socialization, it just was something that she decided she wanted to take control over her education. So because we had only homeschooled, they had never been in a traditional school. Um, I said, well, look here, we're not going to do the neighborhood school because I know the caliber of the effort that we have poured into you as your primary home educators for all these years. So our compromise was, let's do some research and see if we can find a school that we feel is up to your caliber of learning. And we just really stumbled upon an actual dual enrollment high school within the county in which we live, which is Prince George's County. Mm-hmm. So luckily for us, because I wasn't quite ready to let her go, it happened during COVID. And so even though COVID was her first year of high school, in this dual enrollment high school,
it was still at home.
It was still at home 24/7, 5 days a week. So that gave my little mama heart, some pause, because it was a shift. Because again, as I mentioned in my intro, I really thought that we would be homeschooling until 12th grade, and we would be one of the ones that could, I feel like you have those bragging rights where we homeschool all the way. And we didn't make any concessions. And then you realize that's not everybody's story, and how foolish of us to think it's one way and that's it. And that's not it. And so I love the fact that hearing all of these different entry points into how you can even get to full enrollment or being college ready. So she had to prepare. She had to take the PSAT 8-9. And for families who, like myself, we didn't really stress test taking. Like, it's just things you just didn't know. I didn't know many people homeschooling, in my genre and in my age. I was probably one of the forerunners of homeschooling in my age of cohort of friends having kids. And so I was like, well, shoot, I remember the first time she had to take a practice test. She didn't even know how to bubble in the circle. She put an X over it.
So she never took any standardized tests. Wow. So can I ask Natalie to jump in to share?
Sure.
And I guess you can pick what child you talk about, or all of them. I think Nathaniel, who we just met, is he dual enrolled currently?
Yeah, he's dual enrolled. I'll go back to our first experience with dual enrollment was with our oldest daughter, the one who she is an IB coordinator for DC Public Schools. So I'm DC born too. So Dr. Khadijah and I have that. And she had gone on a mission trip to Ukraine and came back and said, I want to learn Russian. And I have been trying to teach her Spanish because I am bilingual. So I was like, okay, you need to learn Spanish. She just didn't want to. Got back from Ukraine and said Russian. And I said, okay, we're going to figure this out because we homeschool, right? So we can figure this out. Rosetta Stone, she maxed that out. And then I said, you need a teacher that speaks Russian. You need somebody that I don't speak Russian. And we were in Virginia Beach at the time. So we found Tidewater Community College had Russian 101 and 102. And so she took those two classes. And a fun story, she was first task, had studied for it. And it's an evening class. And she's the only little homeschooler in there with all these adult learners. And the teacher said, okay, do you all want an open book or do you want, you want a regular test? And she said, I want a regular test, right? She sits up in the front and everything. And everyone else said open book. And so they all groaned when the teacher said, okay, we're going to give you a regular test, right? And they all groaned, and she was struggling as she got out and got in the car and was saying, Mom, I said something wrong. I said, no, you didn't say anything wrong, honey. You did exactly. You studied. And you wanted to show that you had studied. You wanted a test. You didn't want it to be made easy. So that was my first journey as a homeschooling parent, to see the benefit of dual enrollment. And then now the other kids, we had one in North Carolina, dual enrollment, and he transferred like 13 credit hours into his freshman year at American University. And then Nathaniel, who's now our senior, just finished his first semester at Northern Virginia Community College. So he did an English 101 or 111. I can't remember what it is. So yeah, now he's going to do a philosophy. So it's a great experience. I mean,
that's actually where I met my first dual enroll in homeschoolers. Was at Nova.
Yeah,
it's a lot of students there that are homeschooling dual enroll. Yeah,
exactly. It's been great. It's been great. I speak on when I travel around the world, literally speaking on homeschooling and helping families homeschool well, whatever that looks like, right? Because it's different for every family what that looks like, but helping them understand this dual enrollment and the benefits of it and some of the things
Yeah.
to consider. It is the social environment for some people, and daytime classes versus nighttime tends to have a different set of students, but the benefits are amazing. So
They're amazing. I
I
mean,
am a proponent.
I will say my daughter got her associate. So she started ninth grade, and so she just finished a program, her 12th, what would be considered her 12th, and got her associates. But like what you all are saying, she was like, I don't want to do co-ops anymore. Stop putting me in these spaces with little kids. And that's what her
Exactly.
words were, with the little kids.
Yeah.
And so and she had told me before that she didn't want to do college. I said, I don't know what else um I can suggest besides
Mhm.
college.
Mhm.
But Jason, one of the things that stands out in your piece is that and what it highlights, you talk about the benefits of community college, but I personally think that it's also the benefits of dual enrollment. Um, is that when we think of dual enrollment, the student is still connected to like the resources that they won't necessarily have or know that they have when they go to college. But for homeschooling families, the resource is you. So your son has these incredible conversations with you. And so in the chat, someone is asking, I think it's Dr. Joy had asked the question in terms of from your study or from your experience, are there distinctions between what you've seen in terms of the needs of Black males in comparison to young ladies, or is this something, what you are articulating in your chapter, is this something specific to your family?
Absolutely. So number one, yes, there is a distinct difference, and I'll fight, argue, fuss with anybody around that there is, and part of it is not just around Black males; it's around men in general, right? So there is a crisis of male identity that's happening in on college campuses. Men who actually make it into college, they don't persist, they don't continue after their first year. They don't feel supported. They feel alienated. In the wider culture, you've probably seen it online or on social media. You see these little pockets of men kind of questioning, well, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be alpha, sigma, beta, whatever? What does it mean to be, a protector, provider in this particular kind of environment? What does it mean in terms of the relationships that you have with women, relationships that you have with one another? And regardless to how much your son or sons are online, that is part of this generation's struggle. And I'm seeing it in the classroom. So when they get into the classroom, a lot of times they don't talk to one another and they don't talk to me. They don't talk to their professors. This is a male thing, not just a Black male thing. So why is that? Why is that particularly challenging for homeschool students? So like Khadijah said, when they come onto the college campus, like for a dual enrolled student, whether like my son or some of the people in our homeschool community, most dual enrolled students in Philadelphia that come through, they're still tied to their high school community, their high school counselors, their high school teachers. They have that. So they're still tied to a network and a community, whereas homeschool students, they don't. In fact, they're being kind of pushed out of whatever homeschool community they have and being told that, okay, now you have to be in school. And so if you don't have a thing like a passion or a passion project, you haven't been part of a team, you haven't been part of a real club that's being expressed in college. Like, for example, you have homeschoolers that are part of Boy Scouts or 4-H, but there's not really a real nice correlate once you get to college for that. Sports, yes. Music, yes. Some things like debate and some other kind of things, yes. But then them finding, you remember how it was in college, like your first couple of semesters, you don't know you don't know who anybody is and you don't know where anything is. Well, in the current climate right now, a lot of male students will stop going to college and not go through that experience of trying to figure out where the community is, right? And that directly impacts their learning because college is a distinctly social experience, right? This isn't the same question as, well, do homeschoolers socialize? Woo, woo, woo. No, no, no. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about students having a sense and being tied to something, tethered to something, so that they can put feelers out to be tethered to something else.
If you're still with us, don't go just yet. I want to ask you to take a look at our new book, Homeschooling Black Children on a College Pathway. This comprehensive resource includes narratives from half-dozen homeschooling parents who homeschooled children before, during, and after the COVID-19 global quarantine. The stories included in this book showcase strategies to prepare homeschooled children for STEM majors, college athletic programs, dual enrollment, and more. The book discusses the ways the metaverse can be used in college prep and how including a liberatory framework in your homeschool practice can garner positive outcomes for homeschoolers leaving home for college. This book also includes worksheets on how to have important conversations with your homeschool children and the entire family as you prepare your homeschoolers for their transition to college or university. This book is presented by Black family homeschool educators and scholars through the literary nonprofit Black Writers for Peace and Social Justice, Incorporated. Black family homeschool educators and scholars is the first U.S.-based research and education group dedicated specifically to the topic of Black family homeschooling, founded in 2020. Black Family Homeschool Educators and Scholars produces the annual BFHES virtual teach-in and presented the book Homeschooling Black Children in the U.S. Theory, Practice, and Popular Culture in 2022. Thank you for buying. Take care. So well said. And what you are describing, socialization, people are just using it wrong when they ask us, are our children socialized? But you are definitely talking about culture and navigating a culture and being able to know what exists within this culture and to successfully navigate it. And I see the same thing at the HBCU where I teach with the males in particular. I think what you're identifying is specific, but within your own um, units and your interaction with your son. And I'm hearkening back to the earlier conversations on other panels where we're Black families homeschooling other Black children. They should just know Black stuff and feel comfortable in their Blackness. As a Black man raising a Black son, are there things that you take for granted? And this will be my last question, because I want to include Natalie and Chanita in this conversation as well, particularly as women raising Black sons with their husbands. And I would like for them to follow up. But are there things that you took for granted parenting and raising this Black son on this college journey that you had to rewire your thinking to kind of attend to?
Yeah. So just full disclosure, I teach writing, but I also teach Black studies. And my oldest son, he decided he was going to major in Black studies too. So we talk Black stuff. But you know what? I didn't really count on. I didn't really count on him soaking up some of the kind of like unspoken, the kind of like
For a
the
little while.
some of the unspoken assurances that I thought that he was going to have. So what I had to do, and this is the advice that I would give to everybody, got to create an environment where they don't ever feel like they have failed you. For men specifically, a notion of failure as, a man or moving forward, it's deeply cutting and it can be debilitating. That sense of that you failed in some sense. So even though we had some moments in our first semester with my oldest son where he didn't do well and things were a struggle, there was a part of me that was kind of like, hey man, you got this, attaboy, that kind of energy. But that's not what was required for the moment. The moment was, yo, come tell me everything. Because guess what? Nothing is going to shake how I feel about you. I see strength in you that's not coming out right now because of the circumstances, but you're still strong. but you're still capable. Nothing else will change that. And so I had to kind of change my tune and not be like, work harder, but it was more like, yo, I'm hearing you. You're strong no matter what.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I finished that thought.
Well, so it's just simply to say that there's a space where we can talk honestly about the challenges that he's faced, and there's no judgment in me that projects to him that in some way he's failed.
I think that is a beautiful transition. Everything that you just said to you, Chanita, and I know that you know where I'm going with this regarding your son and his response, his just disposition when learning about, you know, the things that you were going through, but him not articulating that for you to kind of get a clear understanding of what was happening. Can you speak a little bit about that, piggybacking off of what Jason was talking about, asking for help?
Absolutely. And my husband is fully engaged, full hands-on dad. He's done PE, math, science. So we feel like we have created that environment where they can come. But later in 2022, early 2023, I was diagnosed with a type of blood cancer that was very rare presenting, and it just wrecked our whole life for a couple of years. And um, I knew how, just with my background being in social work before I became a homeschooler, mental health has always been a really big thrust of me checking on kids and making sure, hey, how you doing? And what are you feeling? And so when, I became sick and, had 10 surgeries in the course of a year, and, it was just a lot. And so I was getting concerned because they weren't demonstrating any needs. They weren't asking for help. We were like, how is this affecting me? I know how it's affecting me. I'm a mess, and I still had a young one that I was homeschooling. And, my son, who's my middle child, was like, yeah, we're cool. Everything's fine. We're going to be here for you, mom. He cut his hair bald in support of me. My husband cut his hair bald. Everyone was like cheering me on. And because I was the one going through chemotherapy and surgeries and multiple surgeries, they didn't want to, and he's told me this later, he didn't want to appear weak for me. He didn't want to appear burdensome. It was almost like his thought process was, how dare I tell my mom I'm struggling in school, and she's the one fighting to stay alive and fighting to be here for us and going through all these things. So, he was running into a little bit of trouble at school because he just did not know how to express his frustration and just dealing with the adjustments of having a mom who's sick and really sick for a little while. And so, we tried to rally around him, and even my daughter's grades in one of her classes dropped, not significantly, but, for her, we knew that wasn't her best. And so we were big on this push of, even though we're your family, we're also human. And we want you to be able to feel comfortable talking about your struggles and where you need help. And so it was a challenge for, a young Black male to pretty much tell his dad that I'm struggling mentally. I don't know if my mom's gonna live or die. I don't really care about coming to school right now. This is like not big on my priority. And so it took us some time to, to get him into some therapy and to really, and I was very adamant. I wanted to have a Black male therapist. I didn't, again, coming from the social work background, I've seen cuckoo and quack, and, it's like you almost you interview your own therapist to make sure, do you know what you're talking about? And so, he had a really great, model in that. And then, they hit it off, and it was nothing long term. He just needed a kind of quick adjustment. And it was interesting where sometimes as parents, we feel like I have to be the one to give my kids everything. We feel like that in the home educating sense too. And then you realize, oh, there's a thing called outsourcing. Well, guess what? There's a thing called outsourcing for their mental health as well. And so everything may not come for you. So it was a challenge, but I'm glad, he was able to come through it. He was able to pull through it. His grades are back on track. His grades are back on track.
I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that we increasingly need to be more comfortable talking about periods where we are not well as parents, and but we are still responsible for the lives of other people, our children, and those stories are incredibly needed for people to be inspired by. But I wanted to pivot a bit to you, Natalie, and I want her to answer first, but I would like for everyone to kind of share when we even talk about homeschooling Black children on a college pathway. A lot of people believe that this pathway begins in high school. I know personally that even though so I know personally as early as how it was started for me, but Natalie, I would love to know for you to kick it off and share when we talk about this pathway, when did those college conversations come up? And was it something where you had decided this is a definite trajectory for my child, or was something that they chose for themselves?
Okay, I wanted to just real quickly say one thing about that mental health piece that Shanita mentioned. That's powerful. And what you just said, Dr. Khadijah, we need to become comfortable with the conversation. Nicole Doyle is on and she has the Flourish event coming up in Georgia. And Anita Gibson and her nonprofit sponsors me to go and speak along with another colleague, Carla Fuller, on mental health and homeschooling. So we are bringing that conversation to the homeschool community. I, prior to homeschooling, was a licensed therapist, and so I don't feel called to go back into practicing, but I definitely am feeling called to bring the conversation to the homeschool community so we can have it. So I just want to say, Shanita, I hear you, and yeah, definitely. The conversation about college, I don't remember honestly ever that my husband and I had a conversation of you all will all go to college. It feels as if it was just there, just part of almost just the air that we breathe and our children's air. Could they have chosen a different path? I believe so. I believe so. And I have to say, I believe so because I am very pro college. I graduated from Spelman College. My husband's a Morehouse College graduate. Um, I feel that in order to go on, in many cases, college is probably very necessary, not the only destination, clearly, but it is still very necessary in many cases for that next level, right, of learning. If you want to go into graduate school, definitely. And for some professions, you need a higher level of academics. So I think that, like for Nathaniel, people have asked him, "Oh, are you going to college?" And I kind of always would wonder, what is he going to say, right? Like when he was 10th grade, what is he going to say? Because we haven't had that conversation of you're going to college. And he said, "Yeah." He just kind of was like, "Yeah, I'm going to college." And I don't think he's ever considered anything else. And our other kids haven't. I think because they saw how college benefited us. They saw the how much importance we placed on academia and how it actually furthered some of the things we wanted to do as a family. And I think that for them, that was just probably part of the expectation, the unspoken expectation. And so with 5 kids, when the first one goes, then it almost triggered, this kind of like, okay, of course, the next one started to get ready and go. And then, and so one of the things I would say too, in touching about that gender piece that Jason was so well expressed, having 2 girls who are the oldest in that whole college discussion, for example, and then the last 3 are boys, and then just finding that piece to really be able to come alongside them and hear their heart. Girls, my girls, maybe not all girls, but my girls talked, right? They weren't chatterboxes, but they were very comfortable. Mom, I need this. I want this. I don't agree with this. They were very comfortable. But the boys were, like everything's kosher, right? Just they didn't have much to say. And you think, hey, what are you thinking? Right? You always want to know, what are you thinking? And they don't talk as much. At least ours didn't. But if I engaged like in a like let's go get something to eat, or let's just go, hey, don't you need some new, soccer cleats, or I don't know, different things like that, real low key, where it wasn't focused, where they didn't feel like I had them under a microscope. they just started naturally talking. And that's when, or the late night conversations. My husband's really good about that. They just talk at night when parents are ready to go to bed. The kids wake up and they want to have deep conversations. And so, um, it's been an interesting journey parenting, the girls versus the boys, but it's been a really great one. And so, yeah, so the college piece, I think it just was part of who we are as a family, that expectation was there. I think they knew that we would love them regardless of what choice that they made, and we would be in their corner supporting them. But I think also it was just, yeah, what they knew was expected and what they also wanted for themselves.
Thank you for that. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. So, I'm going to give Jason the floor for the closing words in terms of that question. Just
Yeah.
what was that moment where that, college was going to be the pathway? And I encourage everybody, if you want to continue to converse and dialogue with these panelists, is to move over to the message boards. Also, I'll have a bit of time during the closing if you have questions for any of the panelists or workshop presenters that you didn't get a chance to answer a question. But tell us, Jason, when did you all start preparing for college?
Probably like most people in this room, it's a part of the conversation around
Mhm.
education. Hey, it's a destination. This is a place that you need to go. You, um, it's important because so much is tied to you having a college degree. It's still the number one indicator
Mhm.
of where you're going to land in terms of your yearly salary and your progression up until retirement. So yeah, we had those conversations pretty early, like around junior high. But you know what had to happen when it actually got time for them to go? I had to release myself of the notion that college, in the way that I envisioned it, was going to be what they were going to experience and what it is that they need for this moment, because their generation is not our generation. So for me, just quiet as it's kept, community college was seen as a step down when I was in high school, right? But now it seems like an incredible answer for students now in this generation. I switched my language from saying that, hey, you have to go to college, to saying, hey, you have to get a higher education. Wherever that might be, you have to further your education in some way. And to be perfectly honest, coming from a Black Studies context, I mean, that's the way we're supposed to think. There is no confines for where we continue to reach higher education and what it looks like. But I just want to end by saying this, specifically around the male students. Male students, your sons need a champion that doesn't live in your household. They need, it could be a mentor, like somebody that's older, that's already in a professional field or already at school. But oftentimes, what I've seen is that students are most successful when they have somebody that's kind of close to their age that they can look to as a model. But occasionally, because as men, things usually have to get pretty bad for us to begin to vocalize and want to talk about it, right? So somebody that's relatively close to their age, that they can begin fielding questions in ways that would feel uncomfortable for them to go to a parent. Even my sons, there are things that they do not come to me and tell me, but because they're in a community where there are some homeschoolers that have been there before, they can drop some questions to them. We also have a center for male engagement at my community college that's centered around male. So there are examples and mentors and things there. So it's important that they have men want champions. That's what we look for. That's what we model ourselves after. So I just wanted to put that bug in there.
I appreciate that. And with that, it went by so fast, but I would like everyone to know, if you're not already on our mailing list, in the blackfamilyhomeschool.org is our website. Get on our mailing list so that you will get the first notification when the book goes on sale. We all are looking forward to when that comes out. But you will hear more from these authors. I know Natalie also has another book she's working on that's coming out. So please, 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 don't ignore the message boards. If any of these panels, any of these talks were things that resonated with you, please let the speakers know. And I will see you at the closing. Bye.